air in the underground command center at Bandar Abbas was thick with the smell of ozone and the mechanical hum of cooling fans struggling against the sweltering Persian Gulf heat. It was exactly 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday in 2026, the hour when the world feels most fragile and the shadows are longest. On the glowing tactical displays, something impossible was happening. 6 massive radar signatures, moving with the heavy, unstoppable momentum of ancient gods, had just crossed the invisible threshold of the Strait of Hormuz. These were not the nimble, stealthy F-35 fighters the Iranians had spent years trying to track. These were ghosts from a different era, reborn with 2026 electronic warfare suites that turned every Iranian sensor into a screen of meaningless white noise. The B-52 Stratofortress had arrived, and they were not alone. Trailing behind the heavy bombers, a fleet of 20 C-17 Globemasters began to bank hard, their massive bellies full of 2,000 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division. This wasn't a patrol, it was a vertical envelopment of the world's most dangerous chokepoint. "Identify yourselves," the Iranian radar operator screamed into his headset, his voice cracking like dry parchment. "You are violating sovereign airspace. Turn back, or we will be forced to engage." The silence that followed on the emergency frequency lasted exactly 7 seconds. Then, a voice cut through the static, cold, clear, and terrifyingly calm. It wasn't the voice of a man asking for permission. It was the voice of a man delivering a final sentence. "This is Brigadier General Miller, commanding the United States Global Strike Task Force. We are not turning back. In exactly 4 minutes, my lead bomber will be within range of your primary coastal batteries. If your radar locks stay active for 1 more second, I will erase your entire command structure from the map before you can breathe again. Do you understand the mathematics of this situation, Commander? I have 96 precision-guided munitions currently slaved to your specific coordinates. One move, and there is no more Bandar Abbas. Make your choice." The Iranian commander, a man who had spent 30 years projecting power and defiance in these waters, felt the cold hand of reality wrap around his throat. He looked at his screens. His sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems were blinking red, reporting total system failure. His communications with Tehran were being jammed by a signal so powerful it seemed to vibrate the very walls of the bunker. He was staring at a wall of American steel, and for the first time in his career, he realized he wasn't a player in this game. He was a target in a shooting gallery where the lights had just been turned off. To understand why this moment in 2026 feels like the end of the world, you have to understand the geography of the throat. The Strait of Hormuz is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through this tiny needle's eye, more than 20 million barrels of oil flow every single day. If you choke this vein, the global heart stops beating. For decades, Tehran played a dangerous game of gray zone warfare here, using fast boats to harass tankers, laying hidden mines, and threatening to shut the gate whenever the West tightened sanctions. But in 2026, the rules of the game were rewritten in blood and jet fuel. The White House had grown tired of the endless diplomatic dance. A new doctrine had been signed in secret in the late autumn of 2025, the Absolute Access Protocol. It was a simple, brutal document. It stated that the United States would no longer tolerate the threat of a blockade. If the Iranians even looked like they were preparing to mine the strait, the response would be immediate, disproportionate, and final. This operation, codenamed Iron Horizon, was the first time the world saw this doctrine in action. The Iranians had spent the last 18 months boasting about their new drone swarms and their upgraded air defense batteries. They believed they had turned the Persian Gulf into a no-go zone for the American Navy. They thought they had achieved a tactical stalemate. They were wrong. They hadn't accounted for the psychological weight of 6 B-52 bombers appearing on their doorstep simultaneously. These planes are older than the fathers of the pilots flying them, But in 2026, they represent a level of destructive power that a swarm of plastic drones simply cannot match. When a B-52 enters your airspace, it isn't a threat, it's a promise of total erasure. The Iranian leadership in Tehran had been watching the satellite feeds for days, seeing the buildup at Diego Garcia and Al Udeid, but they never expected the Americans to actually cross the line. They thought it was another bluff, another exercise meant to intimidate. But as the heavy bombers leveled out at 35,000 feet and the paratroopers began their high-altitude jumps into the surrounding international zones, the realization hit the Iranian high command like a physical blow. The Americans weren't here to negotiate, they were here to take the keys to the house and change the locks while the world watched in stunned silence. The raw, physical presence of the B-52 Stratofortress is something that no radar screen can truly capture. It is a machine of sheer, unadulterated mass. Each of the 6 bombers loitering over the Strait carried 8 upgraded Rolls-Royce F-130 engines, a modification completed in 2025 that turned these Cold War relics into silent, fuel-efficient hunters of the modern age. But it wasn't just the engines. Inside the buff, as the pilots call it, the old analog dials had been replaced by a digital nervous system, the AN/APG-82 AESA radar. This system allowed each bomber to track 70 different targets simultaneously from over 200 miles away. To the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders on the ground, these planes were no longer old dogs. They were mobile arsenals, each capable of carrying 70,000 pounds of precision-guided ordnance. But the real terror lay in the internal weapons bay. For the first time in a combat deployment, the B-52 units were armed with the AGM-183 air-launched rapid response weapon, hypersonic missiles. These projectiles travel at 5 times the speed of sound, meaning that from the moment a pilot pulls the trigger, a command center in Tehran has exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds of existence left. You don't hide from a B-52 in 2026. You simply wait for it to decide your fate. And while the sky was filled with the heavy shadows of the bombers, the horizon belonged to the 82nd Airborne Division, the All-Americans. This is the elite rapid reaction force of the United States, a unit that hasn't seen a quiet day in 80 years. Seeing 2,000 paratroopers falling toward the islands surrounding the Strait is a message that transcends diplomacy. It is a statement of permanent intent. Each paratrooper was equipped with a new integrated visual augmentation system, goggles that turned night into day and allowed every soldier to see the thermal signature of an Iranian sniper through 3 feet of concrete. The Iranian commanders looked at their monitors and saw the tactical reality. Their fast attack boats, which they had boasted could overwhelm any carrier strike group, were being tracked by autonomous AI systems from the bombers above. If the boats even cleared their moorings, they would be vaporized by laser-guided munitions before they reached the 3-mile limit. The technological gap wasn't just wide, it was an abyss. The Americans hadn't just brought a knife to a gunfight, they had brought a scalpel to a room full of blind men. This was the silk of the paratroopers combined with the steel of the Stratofortress, a combination designed to paralyze the Iranian mind before a single drop of blood was shed. The air inside the Supreme National Security Council bunker in Tehran was freezing, yet General Qasemi was drenched in sweat. He stared at the red telephone on the mahogany table, a direct line that had remained silent for nearly 3 years. When it finally rang, the sound was as sharp as a gunshot. He picked it up with a trembling hand, trying to maintain the facade of a man in control of his own borders. "General," a voice said on the other end. It was the American chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The tone was not one of a negotiator. It was the tone of a landlord checking on a tenant who was about to be evicted. "I imagine your screens have gone dark. I imagine you are wondering why your long-range batteries in JASC are not responding to your commands." "This is an act of naked aggression," Ghassemi hissed, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the receiver. "You have entered our territorial waters. We have the right to defend ourselves. My men are ready to die for every inch of this sea." "Your men are currently staring at empty consoles, General," the American replied, his voice dropping to a low, predatory hum. "Let us be very clear. We are not here for a skirmish. We are not here to trade shots with your speedboats. We have 6 B-52 bombers currently orbiting your position. Each one is carrying 24 long-range anti-ship missiles. That is 144 targets we can hit simultaneously. We have already mapped every single one of your silos, every tunnel entrance, and every luxury villa belonging to your command staff." Ghassemi opened his mouth to retort, but the words died in his throat. On the secondary monitor behind him, a high-resolution satellite feed flickered to life. It didn't show the Strait, it showed the very building he was standing in. A red crosshair was centered exactly on the ventilation shaft of the bunker. "Look at your screen, General," the American continued. "We know you are in room 4B. We know you have 12 guards outside that door. We know what you had for breakfast. In 3 minutes, my lead pilot will receive the final authentication code. If you do not broadcast a stand-down order to your entire fleet on an open frequency within the next 60 seconds, the Strait of Hormuz will not be closed by you. It will be opened by us, through the ruins of your command." The silence in the bunker was absolute. Ghassemi looked at his subordinates. They were pale, their eyes darting between the general and the crosshair on the screen. The myth of Iranian defiance, built over decades of propaganda, shattered in a single moment of technical superiority. The general's hands shook so violently, he nearly dropped the phone. He realized then that he wasn't a martyr, he was a relic. I understand," Ghassemi whispered. It was the sound of a man who had just watched his entire worldview evaporate. He turned to his communications officer and gave the nod that signaled total, humiliating retreat. The duel was over. The B-52 bombers hadn't dropped a single bomb, but they had already leveled the enemy's will to resist. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon in 2026, the silhouette of the B-52 bombers began to fade into the brightening blue of the morning sky. They did not retreat, they simply ascended, moving into a high-altitude orbit that would keep them on station over the Strait for the next 72 hours. Below them, the Iranian fleet was in a state of chaotic withdrawal. Fast boats that had once buzzed like hornets were now limping back to their piers, their crews silent and their radars switched off. The message had been received and understood in every corner of the Middle East. The era of the gray zone was over. The United States had demonstrated that in the high-stakes geopolitical climate of 2026, a show of force is only effective if the power behind it is absolute and undeniable. This was not just a victory of military hardware, it was a victory of psychological will. By deploying the 82nd Airborne alongside the world's most iconic bombers, the Pentagon signaled that they were ready for every level of conflict, from a tactical street fight on the islands to a hypersonic strike on the capital. For the global markets, the reopening of the Strait meant that the 20 million barrels of oil would continue to flow, stabilizing a world economy that had been teetering on the edge of a nervous breakdown for months. For the people of the region, it was a cold reminder that the shadow of the Stratofortress is long, and it covers everything it touches. The Strait of Hormuz remains the world's most dangerous chokepoint, but for now, the gates are held open by a hand of iron. If you have stayed with us through this entire broadcast, we sincerely thank you for your time and your attention to these critical global events. Your support is what allows our team to continue bringing you these deep dives into the most pressing military and political escalations of our time. We kindly invite you to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It is a small gesture that provides immense value to our work and helps us grow. We are very interested to hear your perspective on this operation. Do you believe this level of escalation is the only way to maintain peace in the Strait? Or has the risk of a global conflict moved too close to the breaking point? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this report insightful but find it difficult to put your feelings into words, our team would be very happy to see a simple "thank you" in the comments. Thank you for being with us.